Elves, the solitary race who cast aside technology and magic for magic crystals, are one of the longest living races in Gielinor and have a deep and rich history within the world that they now inhabit. How did they come to inhabit the magnificent city of Priffddinas and the forests of Tirannwn? Just to cast a quick note, I'm aware that most of the elven phrases and names are Welsh and I'm not a native Welsh speaker, and I have found some of the pronunciation a little bit challenging, so I do apologise. Elves are often noted as being tall, graceful and with pointy ears, the typical traits of most high fantasy elves. Rather than the typical Gielinorian gods, they follow in the crystalline goddess Seren, who guided their journey into Gielinor from their home planet. Rather than the typical technology and magic we're used to seeing in our human kingdoms, the elves use crystal-based versions, all of which are granted power from Seren. Though due to elves not being seen properly for many years, they were regarded as myths by humans. So we can confidently talk about the elves, it's best to talk about Seren first and look at exactly who this divine being is. Seren, as well as being the goddess of the elves, is the divine aspect of light, being the counterpart to and sister to Zaros. She originates from the world of Fending, where the elder god Mar created her and her brother, and was directly opposed to Zaros' plan of abandoning Mar. Though after some time of looking after their creator, with her efforts going nowhere, she too decided to leave, travelling through many different worlds but finding them empty and abandoned. That was before she travelled to Tirannwn. She came across the elves and approached them cautiously, anticipating fear, but all she found was love. Love for this race of people, and they quickly seemed to love her. Seren had found her new home and vowed to never leave their side. She provided them with crystals infused with her essence, teaching them the art of crystal singing and how to use their voices to shape the crystals into whatever tool they needed. Though elves had considerable lengthier lifespans compared to humans, they weren't long enough in Seren's eyes, with her memories detailing how she watched them wither and die, and each death felt like a blade slicing through her heart. The pain was unbearable for her, and so she thought of a way to stop it, a way to let them live life eternal. She shared her essence with the elves, a piece of her being for each one of them, extending their lives by thousands of years, giving this gift to them through the form of a song, as is elven tradition. The Song of Creation it was called, symbolising the start of a new life for them all, though this gift came with a price, one that shocked many, including Seren. They were now bound to her, which meant that if they strayed too far, they would feel immense pain and eventually die. And with that discovery, Seren sought a way to fix her mistakes. Guthix arrived after some time and spoke of a perfect world brimming with potential and power, and invited Seren personally to join him. The thought of this power even potentially being able to save the people she loved so dearly meant that Seren didn't even hesitate to join him. The curse did mean that the elves had to travel with her, and most did, with only one clan choosing to stay behind. Seren and the elves settled in the lands of Tirannwn, and created the grand crystal city of Priffddinas to remind them of their old home, with great crystal spires looking like they could touch the sky. Though Seren was happy, her mind still lingered on the curse, sensing an immense pool of energy after a millennia of searching. Deep beneath the mountains close to their home, Seren found a source of deathly energy, the Death Altar, created by the Fremennik god V. Thinking it was a perfect counter to her life energy, a way to nullify the curse that caused her beloved people to go insane without her. As she meddled with life before, she meddled once again, in hopes of saving her people. Within Seren was darkness, as there is with everyone. Even beings of pure light can have lingering dark thoughts, and she poured that darkness into the creation that she made, combining it with the deathly energy she had found. Opening her eyes, she beheld what she had created, a fragment of herself, a dark version that seemed as black as the void. Though Seren thought that this would cure the curse, she was wrong. The curse was bound to her as the elves were, and the dark fragment knew that she had failed. She turned on her light-bound sister to destroy her, but failed, being sealed away in the very place she was created. The Temple of Light had been built around this area to ensure that it was kept safe, with an orb of light being constructed as an additional safeguard. Seren thought that it was not her place to destroy what she had created, instead feeling it was up to the elves to discover and decide how to best proceed. While this fragment was sealed, its presence grew within the underground pass, driving many who inhabited the area to insanity and eventually their deaths. The God Wars came and Seren managed to shield the elves from the deadly battles that rage across Gielinor, with Clan Cadawn and the Galapos Mountains providing amazing natural barriers against any invaders. However, one demon did manage to enter Tirannwn. A demon named Zolcano was in search of her brother Skatizo, and the elves thought that the demon was the first of many invaders, though it quickly became clear that it was alone and helplessly searching, leading the elves to capture it for study and to learn about the war. Though Seren didn't play a major part in the war, the enforcement of the Edicts of Guthix was in full strength, and Seren was asked to leave the planet alongside the other gods. Knowing that she was still plagued by the curse, the elves would be driven to insanity without her, and maybe even extinction. With many elves now seeing Gielinor as their home as well, she decided to shatter herself into thousands of crystal shards that were strewn across Tirannwn, ensuring that the elves could live without her full presence. This caused great panic, as the being that had given them immortality and great power had vanished in the blink of an eye, though order was swiftly restored by Lord Baxtorian Cadawn and his wife Galariel. Once the Elven society had calmed and came to the terms with the loss of Seren, they then saw an opportunity to expand their domain, expanding eastward into the lands that were still reeling from the heavy casualties of the God Wars. Baxtorian, who was the head of the Cadawn clan, the primary military clan of the Elves, led them through a time of peace and prosperity. With his supervision, the Elves had constructed the Arundar mountain pass, letting them settle all throughout modern-day Kandarin. Dedicated to protecting the new settlements that began to arise, Baxtorian established non-aggression pacts with several of the local races. Gnomes, having recently returned to the surface, were more than happy to re-establish ties with the Elves. Humans, though much more split on non-aggression, which is just typical, eventually agreed to a treaty. The ogres and goblins that inhabited Feldip Hills though, however, couldn't be reached, being locked in a bloody feud due to Bandos' absence when the gods had to leave. 2 out of 3 alliances? That was good enough for Baxtorian, establishing the Elves as a solid and powerful but peaceful force, and for almost 1,900 years, his kingdom prospered and the Elves lived in relative peace. As the kingdom reached its peak, dominoes slowly began to fall. First, contact with Tirannwn ceased. No one sent through the Arundar mountain pass returned, and his efforts to scry through the peaks were unsuccessful. And since the mountain pass was mysteriously sealed, it only left the Elven settlers with one route to journey home, the underground pass. A place that causes great dismay in all of us, myself, and even you watching this video, so you can imagine how the Elves felt as well. Though 5 of Baxtorian's best scouts were sent through the pass, only 1 returned. Adwer Cadawn, the sole survivor of the mission, brought harrowing news of what had happened in Priffddinas. The Yarwerth clan, aware of the lacking military presence left in the city, had claimed control of the capital, a bloody treasonous act that had left thousands dead. Originally wanting to show that they should lead the city, the plans soon changed as the Dark Lord began to influence their decisions. The news caused outrage, many settlers voicing their fury for the heinous act that the Yarwerth clan had enacted, and so Baxtorian decided that they must be forced from the city. Over the course of 5 years, Baxtorian led a campaign into Tirannwn, where he attempted to overthrow the Yarwerth clan, his army battling all the way to the walls of Priffddinas, where he besieged the city but to no avail. After all, Seren had built Priffddinas to withstand attacks from the gods. Despite this, there was a secret entrance that was found, with the idea of rescuing the clan elders being hatched. The night the rescue would begin, Baxtorian was informed that his kingdom in the east had collapsed. Filled with grief, his mind could only think of his dear wife that he had left to oversee the kingdom in his place, hoping for her survival. Knowing that he could not lose another opportunity, he continued with his plan. Over the course of several weeks, Baxtorian and his team had been finding and freeing several clan elders, reverting the city into its crystal seed form to force Lord Yarwerth to settle in a small camp just outside the gate of the mighty city. He sent the elders into hiding, and rushed what was left of his forces through the underground pass while Yarwerth was hot on his heels, thinning his forces 1 soldier at a time. Eventually, with a shadow of his former strength left, he came to find his eastern kingdom in ruins and his wife missing. Though it's likely he could have stopped the human invasion from destroying any other settlements, his obsession was fixated on finding his wife, and by the time he had come to terms with her death, the human kingdoms had only grown in power and stood mighty above the weakened army. With his grief so terrible, Baxtorian built a monument to Glariel east of Baxtorian Falls, travelling to the home under the falls to seal himself and his wealth within a room, turning to stone after performing a ritual. With Baxtorian missing and his wife presumed dead, the settlements in the east continued to be assaulted by enemy forces, so the remaining elves simply just left. They were forced to retreat to their kin in Tirannwn, where they were reunited with the survivors of Iorwerth's betrayal, wandering Isfadar and fighting against the Iorwerth clan whenever they could. Eventually, they would find a small settlement of Letia, which housed many of the rebel elves that still felt the fury of betrayal within their hearts. Slowly but surely, elves became a long-gone memory and a myth to the humans who inhabited the lands built upon the ruin of the elven settlements, and the elves fought their guerrilla war in the forest of Isfadar, hoping that one day they'll be able to defeat Iorwerth and eventually see the glory of Priffddinas once again. But that's not the end of the story, because we get involved. The almighty adventurer, slayer of dragons, doer of small favours, and of course, Max Caper. Right? Anyway, within the ElfQuest series there are 8 quests. Plague City, Biohazard, Underground Pass, Regicide, Roving Elves, Morning's End Part 1 and Part 2, and Song of the Elves. I'll cover the relevant portions of each quest, as there's plenty of amazing creators with already released guides for all of these quests, but we're focusing on the elves here. In Biohazard is where we first learn of the intriguing tale of King Tyrus, the King of West Ardoin and King Lathas' brother. We learn how he has been corrupted by the Dark Lord after drinking from the Chalice of Eternity, which is the reason why the city had been split apart, to protect East Ardoin and all of Gielinor. But that sounds suspicious, right? Well, in Underground Pass, and I know you shuddered at the mention of that, trust me, I did too, we are asked by King Lathas to traverse the Underground Pass in order to reach the lands to the west, so we can eventually put a stop to his evil brother. An evil mage named Ivan is present within the pass, stopping any progress within it. And that's where we, being the dashing, strong heroes, put our skills to use. Eventually, after completing the quest, the well that would allow you access to the other side is blocked. But when you inform the king of this, he entrusts the task of unblocking the well to his mages, so you can eventually perform your duty of regicide. After some time, you speak to the king again, and he commands that you go through the Underground Pass once again. It's just terrible, isn't it? And finally reach the Western Lands. So our mission to assassinate King Tyrus begins. And once we traverse the Underground Pass for, hopefully, the last time, we finally take our first steps into Tirannwn. Initially, as we take our first steps within the long lost lands, a young elf named Idris appears and questions what we're doing on their lands. Though as fast as he appeared, he is struck down and killed within the blink of an eye. Esilt and Morvran appear and instruct us to seek Lord Iorwerth, found towards the northwest of the forest. A lovely way to meet the elves for the first time. We track down Lord Iorwerth and speak to him, telling us to meet a tracker, and despite some annoying details within the quest, we eventually make our way to the Tyrus camp and kill one of the king's personal bodyguards. As we continue with our quest, we use the handy book of Big Bangs to create a barrel of naphtha, creating a bomb to officially become an assassin of kings. So we go to the catapult just outside of the Tyrus camp, and load up the barrel bomb, and launch it straight for Tyrus' tent, causing it to explode and cover the area in a raging fire. Job done, king slain, hands slightly bloody. We return to Lord Iorwerth and are given a letter to take to the king, with the addition of having access to the overground pass of Arendar. On the way back to the castle, we're approached by a young elf named Aryan Wynn, who breaks the magical seal on the letter and tells us to read it. Upon reading the words etched onto that parchment, we learn that King Tyrus wasn't actually corrupt, it was his brother, who's in league with the Dark Lord after all. Knowing we can't do anything yet, we return the letter and get on with our day, hoping a time will come for the king to see his downfall. Deciding to help the rebel elves and to stop Lord Iorwerth's scheme of taking over Camelot, we're guided to the rebel elf settlement by Isilwyn and Elined. Though Isilwyn is distrusting of any humans due to the bloodshed of the past, especially as they were responsible for the death of his grandmother. We inform him that we moved her tomb to the waterfall during the waterfall quest, which helps him change his mind to help us if we help him complete the ritual of burying her. Throughout the quest Roving Elves, we retrieve a consecration seed and bury it in the chamber to lay her spirit to rest, watching as the crystal tree begins to grow. Morning's End Part 1 and 2 has us travel to the rebel elf settlement and begin assisting the elves with their rebellion and enacting the plan to bring down the Yarwerth clan once and for all. Within Part 1, we learn that the mourners who essentially control West Ardoin are actually Yarwerth elves, and we need to learn their nefarious plans. Through various methods, including shooting paint at sheep to make them look diseased, we learn that the Yarwerth clan wants to delve into the underground past with the enslaved citizens of West Ardoin and make a tunnel towards the Temple of Light to resurrect the Dark Lord. Morning's End Part 2 begins once again in the Elven Rebel settlement, where we are instructed to stop the mourners from excavating under West Ardoin. Well, as you can probably guess, we eventually make our way to the Temple of Light. We see the digging team reach the temple and be attacked by shadows, but we advance, heading to a blackened crystal and breaking off a small piece that we take back to the settlement, where Elined enchants it to be a newly made crystal. We return to the temple and complete the infamous light puzzle, and speak to a dwarf named Thorgel, where he reveals that there is a back door of sorts that him and his companions made. In return for bringing him 3 random items, he promises to give you a death talisman. Once you do this, you proceed to the Death Altar and charge the crystal that Elined repaired for you, which you then use on the black crystal to fully empower it, restoring the safeguards set in place so long ago. This should stop people from entering the temple for another 1,000 years, hopefully. Then we come to the titular Song of the Elves. This will be an abbreviated short version of the quest explanation where I'll focus on the key points. Otherwise we could be here for hours. Song of the Elves is a long quest and the finale in the Elf series, and follows on directly from the events of Morning's End Part 2. With the Temple of Light sealed for the foreseeable future, we are thrown right in the middle of exposing the plague as a hoax and ensuring the success of the revolution against Lord Yarwerth. When we start this quest, we find out that Eleanor, our trusty companion from this series, has been imprisoned by the king, who tells us that she was imprisoned for spreading news about the plague being fake because he can't risk the truth getting out there and putting the people of Ardoin in danger, as if he still expects us to believe that. We decide to disguise ourselves as a knight of Ardoin to rescue Elena, who informs us about the Ardoin resistance, a group of citizens who want to overthrow the king, who they see as an unfit ruler given his lies and deceit. We rally the citizens of West and East Ardoin, riling them up by spreading misinformation and generating discord, ensuring their hatred for the king builds. Once we have enough support, we encounter guards trying to quell the insurrection, which we quickly dispatch. Once the guards are dealt with, we see a cutscene where the king is brought out and we watch as he is sentenced to death for his crimes. A second king that we've helped meet an early grave. After the execution, a hooded figure knocks us out and we find ourselves in the Yarwerth camp. Cutscene plays where we are brought before Lord Yarwerth, and right before we become prisoners, Tirannwn and the resistance appear to rescue us. Lord Yarwerth informs us of his real plans, but he lied to the king to access West Ardoin to reach the Temple of Light to summon Seren, much to Tirannwn's disbelief. At this point, it's explained that Yarwerth broke one of the seals in the library and discovered that a part of Seren remained trapped within the temple. Once we are let go by Yarwerth, we return to the rebel settlement and discuss what to do next, deciding to venture towards Backstorian Falls. Inside, we solve a puzzle by placing certain items on the correct pillars, and before we know it, Backstorian's statue springs to life, and we find the old king right before our eyes. Once we make our way back to the settlement, we're tasked with finding multiple clan leaders who had gone into hiding, and concoct a potion that will allow us entry into the Grand Library of Priffddinas, where we must break multiple seals to gain more knowledge. As I covered previous memories which gave us insight into her origins, I'll mention one that was left out, the seal that Yarwerth broke, the Seal of the Forgotten. A memory of Seren reveals that her dark guilt is sealed away in the Temple of Light, but an orb of light at the shrine in Gorla exists to access that part of her. Once we retrieve everything we need, we explain everything that we found to the rebelling elves, most of whom are shocked and one even calls you a liar, though Backstorian believes your findings, and we continue with our quest. We find 2 more elders before going to retrieve the orb that Seren's memory spoke of from the Yarwerth camp. Once we retrieve this and hand it back to Backstorian, he privately asks us to find another elf, the one who called us liar and was taken away, as they had been acting suspiciously. Once we find him, we witness a conversation between him and a Yarwerth clan member, which leads us to accuse him of being a traitor, which he refutes. This conversation is interrupted as the informant tells us that Lord Yarwerth has been making plans to attack the settlement as there was a traitor among the rebel elves. We return to the settlement and see that it's under heavy siege, and we immediately spring to action, saving numerous children and citizens before we are interrupted by Lord Yarwerth, who reveals that it was Tirannwn who was the traitor, turning on them when he discovered that they truly wished to return Seren to the world, and forces Backstory to hand over the Orb of Life. Sargwyn attacks Esilt but is killed instantly, before we fight Tirannwn in order to go after the Orb once more. Once the siege is over, the surviving elves hold a funeral for Ysagwyn. Silwyn finds out from Backstory that he sent what remained of his army to their graves in an effort to find his wife, despite knowing that it was a trap, which enrages Silwyn to leave for the underground pass, determined to fight Iorwerth on his own. Before we journey to the pass ourselves, we find 2 more clan elders, bringing the majority of the clans together in unison for a joint assault. Once we're ready and stocked up, we head into the underground pass, where we reach the dwarven camp and help our elf allies defend the camp from several elf warriors and archers who attempt to destroy the defences. Once we successfully defend the area, we come face to face with Esilt and defeat him, gaining vengeance for our brother-in-arms that was killed, though we didn't stop Lord Iorwerth in time. He managed to pass through the crevice into the Temple of Light and free the fragment of Seren before we could stop him. Tirannwn is filled with doubt at the sight of the fragment and shoots Lord Iorwerth before the fragment drags us into her realm, believing us to be a pawn of Seren who is sent to destroy her once and for all. An intense battle takes place between us and the fragment of Seren, though we emerge victorious, and a cutscene plays showing how Lord Iorwerth is horrified by the defeat of the fragment, stating how even though it was angry, hurt and confused, it was innocent. Before dying from his wounds, he states that he hopes we're happy with what we've done. Following the defeat of Lord Iorwerth and the fragment of Seren, we're brought to the gates of Priffddinas, where we see the city is newly regrown. We thank Tirannwn for stopping Iorwerth, a little too late at that, but Tirannwn claims he had to, and decides to leave the Elven lands for good, the guilt for his role in the deaths of so many proving to be too much. He plans to travel the world and redeem himself in the process. This is where Backstory welcomes us and Elena as the first humans to visit the city, and we take our first steps inside Priffddinas. And that is where our tale ends. With the clans reunited and the gates open to those trusted, the elves once again are at a relative peace, and the threat of Seren's evil fragment is laid to rest. The questline is at an end, for now at least, though I do hope we hear more about Seren and the elves, as I'm sure their input will prove useful for future troubles that may plague us. Plus, getting an enhanced crystal weapon seed from the gauntlet wouldn't hurt either. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This was definitely a longer one, given all the lore and history and the plentitude of quests we have to cover for the elves, but it was great reading through it all and condensing it into one video for you. If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe, it's going to help out the channel a lot. I've got plenty of projects in the pipeline, but if you guys want to hear about anything specific, please do let me know and I'll see what I can do. But for now, thanks for watching, and see you next time.